every business runs better with a playbook, and people should be asking all of the businesses in their life what they use for their playbook. Where is their playbook? Have they taken the time to be intentional about how their business works, about who does what in the business?
What is up, Growth House family? I'm your host, Jesse Ray. Today we have a very special guest. There's not too many people that I want to just lay out the red carpet for, but Chris, you've come very highly recommended by two of my good friends, and I'm super excited for you to be here. And I want to start off by just giving people kind of a background about you, okay? So you are the CEO and founder of Trainual, a leading software platform transforming the way businesses onboard, train, and scale teams. You're on a mission to help business leaders document and delegate so they have more time to focus on things they love. You serve businesses in every country in the world. Trainual has been recognized in Inc.'s Best Workplace list for 4 years straight. That's incredible. You're an author of a best-selling book, The Business Playbook, How to Document and Delegate What You Do So Your Company Can Grow Beyond You. You're here in Scottsdale, Arizona, man, with your wife, 2 boys, huge Suns fan. And this is one thing that's incredible. You also find time to not only compete, but also train for marathons and triathlons, including the Boston, New York Marathon, and even marathon in Antarctica. Chris, this is not a typical bio. This is more like a life resume. So this is incredible.
It's a life so far resume, but I got to keep punctuating, got to keep adding stuff to that list.
Absolutely. What makes you do like these cool, amazing, crazy things like doing a marathon in Antarctica? Like what would give you that inspiration?
It's an experience. So it's a challenge and it's an experience. I think, when we did the Antarctica marathon, I did it with my brother. We booked it when there was a 3-year waiting list, and then COVID happened. So it ended up being a 5-year waiting list. At the time, we couldn't afford it and we couldn't get away from the business for a month in order to go do it. But we thought 5 years from now, we'll be able to. So we put our names on the list, and it was always in the back of the head, like it's coming closer, it's closer. And so when you've got to run a marathon in Antarctica in a few years, you think I better run one close by first, so we started training and little by little you work up to where it's not such a scary thing. And so I like doing that. I like setting big goals out in the future and then getting closer to them.
That's amazing. So how much harder was it in Antarctica versus New York?
2 hours harder in terms of my finish time. It was, what I didn't expect is Antarctica is really hilly. And so there was over 4,000 feet of gain going up and down these hills. And then there's penguins everywhere. The snow's coming down, blowing sideways by the time we finished. There's so many variables about that race that you don't even think about until you're over there. There's like eagles dive bombing you because they don't know, they think you're a penguin and they're like, why are you here? You can't bring snacks onto the land with you because there's nowhere to throw them out. So you have to just like empty your snacks into your pockets and no wrappers allowed. So many variables, but man, what an experience.
That's crazy. Can you even really run? Or I'm trying to even think how you run in, those conditions.
Yeah, you can run. It's like packed snow and ice and
Okay.
gravel, and so we ran in the warmest of the seasons too, which is it was like high 20s, 20 degrees.
That's crazy. Man, shout out to you for doing that. I've always wanted to go to Antarctica. I can't commit that I will run a marathon there though.
It's cool. It's wild to see it with your own eyes and know that there's like maybe 100 people across this whole continent that's twice the size of Australia.
Wild. So we're going to talk about Trainual, how that's doing and everything.
Yeah.
And also we're talking about your come up story. You went from video production company to consulting to now Trainual. But what I want to ask is just real quick, where is Trainual right now? You can talk about, employee count, revenue, if you're open to sharing that. And really, what is your main role right now?
Yeah, so my main role is CEO. I mean, it's my title, but I called myself a CEO for a lot of years when I was doing a lot of things. And now I can confidently say that I'm actually being a CEO. And so we've got a full leadership team, that operationally can run the day to day when I do things like leave for a month and go to Antarctica. We are almost 140 people full time in the business. We're mostly based out of our headquarters here in Tempe. We, from like a valuation standpoint, are in the 9-figure valuation, revenues in the mid 8 figures, and yeah, just growing every day. And like you said in the intro, super proud to have had over 1 million people around the world use the product, and for it to have someone use it in 195 countries. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, when I read that out loud, I was just like, "Is that true?" It's incredible for all those countries to use your product. That's amazing, man.
Yeah,
So take us back. Journey from high school is when you really started your business, which I've heard you also had the entrepreneurial spirit as a kid, but really you kind
for
of really
sure.
started with your video production company in high school. Walk me through that, evolution to now Trainual.
Yeah, so early days for sure. I was like a serial child entrepreneur, the lemonade stands and selling candy door to door and wrapping paper and slinging anything, setting up people's firewoods and cleaning their decks and cleaning houses and driveways and power washing furniture, like anything that I could make money with. And so when I was getting into high school, 14 years old, I thought I wanted to be on TV when I grew up, like a sportscaster. And so we had this video production department at my school that I signed up for classes, and I got certified to use the camera. And one weekend I took the camera home for a school project, and my neighbor was like, "Hey, it's my grandpa's 80th birthday. Can you film it?" I was like, "Why, I have this camera right here. Of course I could film it." And so, it was like $100 for this. And then it was, can you film the soccer games at the school? And I would get paid, $40 a game. And then my friend and I, we started this little kids television show that got aired around the town that I grew up in. And so everyone started asking us, "Can you film this? Can you film that?" And little by little, it turned into a business. So through high school, I grew that company to where, I was making more than any of my friends that were at, gas stations and restaurants and retail stores. And I kept the business going into college. I bought my partner out, kept growing the company, and through college, set up a office, started hiring full-time employees, graduated college, kept this business going for 12 years to the point that we had over 300 camera operators, 3 offices. We were doing events in all 50 states across the US. And it was really just like a master class in entrepreneurship and learning what to do and what not to do as well.
Well, just talk to me a little bit. Like, how do you run this huge business while also going to college? Like 300 different people doing this across the country. Like, just what was going on in your head?
Yeah, so I started going to different cities and finding crews that were, camera operators that could do events. And once I had a good crew in the city, then I would start booking events in that city. And when the real unlock happened was finding organizations that had multiple events around the country and were scrambling to try to find people in every city to do their events as they traveled. And so I went to organizations like US Figure Skating at the time and said, "All right, you've got these competitive figure skating competitions everywhere in the country. I can do all of them. You don't have to worry about finding different crews. Just book it through me." And they loved that because I was handling the logistics, the complexity. And so for me, the important part became, how do we onboard and train all of these people so that I've got editors and camera operators and production managers and sales reps at the tables that fill these roles across venues in America. And then at the same time, we had to record for every venue who has unions and who doesn't. Where are the loading docks? Where do you run the cables? How do you connect to the jumbotrons? Where's the instant replay system go? Where do we set up to get the most traffic for a sales table as a vendor? And so everything was process and operations. And so growing up in that business, I slowly, went from me on camera to hiring someone on camera, and from hiring one person on camera to hiring 10 people on camera, and having 10 different ways to do things to having one way to do things. And as we refined how the business works, I was building this like operations manual. Here is how my business works, almost like a franchise. And so scaling that business, I became obsessed with the operations, the logistics. And I think a lot of companies just don't focus on that.
Makes sense. And then were you making some good money? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, yeah, we were, I mean, millions of revenue and I like decent take home, but I was constantly reinvesting. Like the business is pretty slim margins because technology was advancing so quickly that every 6 months I was buying a new fleet of cameras and new tripods, and batteries would die and you'd have to replace them, and mics would get left at the venue and you have to rebuy them, and we're shipping gear across the country and there's travel costs. And so it was actually like a really great business to grow up in, because I had to learn to be scrappy and resourceful and do a lot with a little. And so when I ultimately sold that business, I looked at a lot of my friends' companies and thought, wow, like you've got it easy. You like all your people are in one spot, and like you're only doing this one thing. I could come in and make a huge impact in your business. And so that's what I started doing next. I started doing like operations consulting.
Yeah, walk me through that transition from, all right, I'm going to sell this to now go into consulting. Was there a real game plan, or was it like, hey, I'm, tired of this. Let me take that payoff, that
Yeah.
payout, and then dive into consulting?
Yeah, so for a year, it was first that my director of operations, I promoted him to be president, and I stepped back to be just the owner of the business. So I got rid of every last responsibility that was on my plate, and I would just do calls with him on a monthly basis where we would review the financials, and it was like I was an investor. And so in that that maturity step, I found myself with a lot more free time, and so I decided to just start filling the time by going to friends' businesses and saying, I'll spend a day a week at your company and a day a week at your company. And for me, it was like education. I had been in video production for 12 years. So I thought, well, I want to learn about retail. I want to learn about real estate. I want to learn about, home services and the trades and electricians and plumbing. I want to learn about contracting or medical offices. And so I spent time across all these different businesses, and I saw that process is industry agnostic. Everyone has a way that they do something. Everyone has roles and responsibilities. Everyone has the same kind of blueprint that I had in my business. And if you take away the context of the industry, everything else was pretty much the same. And so I was getting so much more excited about the consulting work than about scaling my video business. And so a year into handing it off to my president is when I went to sell the company. And I went through that transaction. I sold it kind of in a two-part sale, half of it to our biggest customer and half to our biggest competitor, which was an interesting kind of story in itself. But then I went all in on consulting. And so my consulting company was called Organized Chaos. Come in, map out all the chaos in your business, interview everyone, and then just piece it all back together. Like, what do we actually want to focus on here? And I had a whole framework for doing that. But over 5 years, I interviewed over 2,000 employees one-on-one to understand the problems in their business. And that's where the themes really started emerging that led to Trainual.
Yeah, so 5 years, and then you kind of start figuring out these pieces and maybe a problem that you can solve, and then you decided to go the software route. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the way that it happened was pretty organic. One of my first consulting clients was a company that had a video production element to what they did. They did live equestrian events like the horse industry. Yeah, so they had and they had a video production side to it, and then they had a software component to their business. They were sort of like a directory, a Yelp or something for that industry. And so I came in as a consultant originally on the video side because that was my expertise. And then they asked me if I would wrap my arms around and organize their software project, which was a mess. It was burning tons of money. And over the course of a few months, I really started to understand how software development works. And so I kind of tucked that away in the back of my head. And then as I went company to company, helping organize their operations, I found myself putting together these operations manuals. And they were a lot of, spreadsheets of roles and responsibilities, and a lot of YouTube videos of best practices, and a lot of written materials of like employee onboarding and handbooks. And I thought it was crazy that I'm just delivering a Dropbox folder to every new client. And so I started thinking, well, what if there was a software that's designed for this? Let me use the software expertise I picked up over here and hire some contractors and build a software that's for a business training manual. And so that was where Trainual came from. And that was kind of midway through the consulting business, but it was not an overnight success.
What time frame, just so people know? What year was
So
this?
So this was 2015 that I first built Trainual. And I originally took it out to a couple hundred people that were in my mailing list, and I sold 3 accounts. So it was not a big success, but I went back to consulting and I thought, okay, let me figure out how I could sell this. And so every new consulting job I took on, I delivered their materials in Trainual and said it's free for 6 months. Keep using it after that if you want to. And over a couple of years, I built up a few dozen of these companies that were paying me the $99 a month and a few $1,000s of recurring revenue. And that's when I realized, all right, this is kind of a proof of concept. Let me try this again.
And how important do you think it is for people starting off in their business? Because, recurring revenue is something sexy word right now, especially
Yeah.
when people are thinking about the end in mind, looking to scale, what kind of multiple, well, I need recurring revenue. How much of a focus was that when you created Trainual? Were you thinking like, I want to scale this to one day potentially sell?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, my OG recurring revenue was filming, soccer games at my high school. It was like, this is something I can get paid for over and over again. And initially we started by doing weddings, but I used to joke that like most brides only get married once or twice. But, like that customer goes away, maybe 3 times if you're lucky. But like a sporting event happens every week, every few days. Tournaments happen every month. The championships are every season or every year. And so by locking in the video business on sports, we developed that recurring revenue. And so we would have a contract, and every year we would be building up our contracts to expand the events that we did. And so it makes the business more sustainable. And then one season gets really busy, I would start looking for sports that have the opposite season so that we could fill our capacity on the other part of the year. And so that recurring revenue is always a part of my model. When it was consulting, it was retainer work. Like initially it was me. Then I had 5 employees and consultants doing the work for me, and we had dozens of companies on retainers. Again, making 7 figures a year on just the consulting work with 5 employees, and but that was recurring. And then with Trainual, it's a subscription software. So that's always been part of the business model.
So, Chris, sounds like you had the Midas touch because you went from, 10 years in video production, did that company, then did consulting. Sounds like you were successful in that, and then went into Trainual. I mean, we hear stories about people who got to go into debt, got to, max out credit cards. Was that any part of your story? You just,
Oh yeah.
you always got it, Chris.
It may sound like that, but there's some rough years. Like the first year of relaunching Trainual, 2018, I was so confident that we had something, and I knew I wanted to scale it and get it out to the world. And so we started that year with a few dozen companies on the product, like I said. And then by the end of that first year, month 13, we hit 1,000 companies on the product. And that was a crazy scale year, but I went over $300,000 in personal debt trying to fund that growth. So I had a home equity line of credit, maxed out every personal credit card. I was selling off clothes, and I had a little electric scooter that I sold. My wife's calling me from the grocery store because all our cards are declining and she has to like put the groceries back. Like it got dire there for a bit, but I was so bought in to what we were building that it was like, why wouldn't I spend every dollar I have on this?
Chris, let's stay here for a second because we live in the world of social media. We live in the world of Instagram. We see every day is highlights. And this is
Hmm.
why I also like to ask revenue questions kind of this transparently because a lot of people just think you become an entrepreneur. And if you don't have $1 million business after year one, you're a failure, right? That's just a perception out there. We know it's so different than that. So let's stay right here on what this, that season of learning and growing and going into debt look like? And one of the questions I had just from you sharing that was you went all in with your own personal money. What was your thought process of I'm going to fund this, bootstrap this versus I want to take outside investment?
Yeah, a lot of people initially think, let me raise some money and put someone else's capital to work. But I thought, if I'm not willing to put everything I have into this, how could I look anyone else in the face and get them to put their money in? I better be willing to put everything into this if I'm ever going to ask anybody else for money. And I also thought, if companies are valued based on their revenue and their growth rate, and that's kind of how software is valued, then the longer I can go and the bigger we can grow, the more the company will be worth. and the more of the company I would get to retain if I ever do raise outside capital. And so it was those two things in my head that made me just want to push as hard as possible in those, those early years. And my brother actually was right there alongside me. So he wasn't funding it. He wasn't going into debt, but he was working for free in those first like 9 to 12 months. And he came on as like a co-founder and partner because he was pouring the sweat equity in while I was putting the dollars in. He's pouring the sweat equity in, and you need that at the beginning. You need people that have such strong conviction that they're willing to just go for it. And both of us would think, if this doesn't work, I knew I could always go back to consulting. If it didn't work, he knew he could get a job. I had a bunch of consulting clients that would love to hire me, and I knew if it didn't work, I could put my tail between my legs and get a job and pay myself out of debt in the next 5 years or something. So I knew I had that backup plan. But the voice inside my head kept telling me, like, oh, someday, like, if only I had this amount in the bank, then I could take a swing and really go for it. If only I had like this much extra cash sitting around, then I could go for it. And what I realized is I do have that much extra cash if you add up all of my credit card limits and my home equity line of credit and that was just like a light bulb moment. That's like, wait a second, I do have that much cash. Like, am I lying to myself, or am I actually going to go for it? And I pulled the trigger.
That's amazing. I've had conversations with a lot of people, and a lot of people are like, I wish I would have swung for the fences when I had that idea. And a lot of people say you only have like, 1 to 3 of those ideas in your lifetime. And it sounds like you said, no, I'm going all in. I'm betting on myself and I'm swinging for the fence.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And like, I can't imagine even having that call from, a wife or someone that you love deeply and saying, yeah, you probably got to put that back, but like, babe, trust me. What kind of like, how was that? Because I know there's people probably going through that right now when someone's like believes in them, but then at the end of the day you might have some of those limiting beliefs. Like, how are you able to persevere through even your wife saying we max this out? Well, what are you doing? Like, that's got to be tough.
There was external validation that really helped. I think if I was coming home every night and telling her, don't worry, babe, like I got this, but had nothing else to show her, that probably wouldn't have been good. But the fact that we had customers signing up every few days or every day, and the fact like we won this in Arizona Innovation Challenge, this like pitch competition. We had people that were emailing in and asking if they could invest. We had all this kind of external activity, people asking me to be on podcasts. And so like, that kind of stuff went so long in helping, I think, both of us believe that we're onto something. But we talked about it every week. It was like, okay, here's the bank account balance, and here's the credit cards, and I had this spreadsheet where every week I was updating it, and like the line was just going down, 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 and it was like, all right, how much do we believe? But tons of open communication.
That's amazing. Okay, so how long did it take for you guys to get out of that valley of grinding it out to then it took off?
Yeah. So the end of that first year, Amex actually, believe it or not, they tell you that they're charge cards and there's no balance and just, pay it off every month. Not true. They turn it off whenever they want to. And so they were getting uncomfortable with my level of ad spend on a monthly basis, and they just shut it down one day. And they said, you can't put any more charges on here until you pay it down. And it was like, either I'm going to pay down the credit card or I'm going to pay payroll. That's a tough decision to make. And so I paid payroll, I optimized for the team, but then I said, okay, we have to stop our advertising. We've got a couple weeks to figure this out. And so I started going to just friends and family at that point and saying, like, I need a short bridge of some kind of debt to be able to like make my credit card payment while I work on a bigger solution. So, fortunately, I was keeping people updated through the process. And I think that's the lesson here is, as you're doing this, if I popped up out of nowhere and started reaching out to people that hadn't heard from me in 2 years and asking them for money, no one would have given me the money. But the fact that this whole journey, every month I'm meeting with these close people and saying, here's where we're at. Here's the number of customers we have. Here's where our revenue's at. And they were seeing this exciting story unfold. When it finally got to a place that I was in a point of need, I had a friend that wired me cash same day. He was like, I'm here to help. Come by my office. We put my financials up on the up on his TV. He said, oh, you need money for payroll? I was like, yes, I do. He said, all right, I'm going to wire you the money today. But it was because I had built the trust over the course of that journey.
How important did you have a coach or mentor? Was that like a part of what you were doing as you were scaling and growing?
Formally for Trainual, I had a mentor that started in the second year. So through that, like that dark, the first year, it was really just like my wife and my brother and some friends that I was meeting with along the way, other friends that had businesses. And I was in these incredible groups like EO, if you've heard of EO. So I had my forum that I was able to lean on and tell the stories every month as we were going through this. But yeah, over the years, I've had tremendous coaches and consultants and mentors.
I love that. Let's get tactical. You down to get tactical with me?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. You talk a lot about the power of delegation. And so walk me through what you see a lot of founders or, entrepreneurs when they're going from 6 to 7 figures in the sense of operationally, what kind of constraints do they have and how do you know, solve some of those constraints?
So the biggest thing that I see is people have a very cost conscious mindset instead of a time conscious mindset. And so an example of this is like, I remember having a client that had a print shop, and every week he would get all the printing orders that came in through the manufacturer, and he was a broker. He would put those in the back of his van and he would drive them around to all of his clients to drop off those orders. And he justified it to me that he was only making this round every, a couple times a week or for a few hours a week. And if he used a courier service, it was going to cost X amount. But if he could just do it with those 3, 4 extra hours that he had, it was free. And a lot of people think my time is free because you're not shelling out any money. And that is a huge mistake to make, because what you need to do is you need to get in the space of paying other people to do that work so your business can scale around those fixed costs. If you rely on yourself to do everything in the business that's free, you'll never be able to scale. You have to build a business that can afford to pay for all of the work that actually is being done in the business. And so when you put those costs in place, you hire that courier, you bring in someone to answer the phones or to do the admin work. You develop this cost structure for the business that then makes your mind say, okay, well, what do I need to charge in order to make this cost structure work? And immediately you start charging more and you develop that margin. But a lot of people get stuck thinking like, I'm just going to do this the free way, which is I'm going to do everything. And so that like 6 to 7 figure shift, I think, is so much about leverage in the business. It's understanding which things need to come off your plate and who can do those things more cheaply, clustering those tasks together and saying, let me at least get a VA, or let me at least get a part-time person locally or contractor or an outsourced service or hopefully a full-time employee. Only 1 in 3 businesses takes that leap. There's 35.5 million businesses in the United States. Only 8.4 million ever hire an employee. So it's like, it's a crazy leap to go from a business of one to a business that employs other people. But that's what limits you from growing.
Gosh, hitting it right on the head for me because I'm like guilty. In the past, I've been guilty. And then finally, I hired some help because I was like, yeah, the same thing. Oh, this is free if I do it myself. But then my value is zero. Like, that doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense at all.
So let me ask you a couple questions here. When do you think is a good time to start paying yourself? Which you said right up front, you probably should have that margin. So what's your time worth, right?
Yeah.
But then like taking a salary for yourself as an entrepreneur who's in that 6 figure range, when would you say is a good time? And then also, what is a good percentage?
A good percentage of your revenue to pay yourself? Or how,
Yeah.
what do you mean?
What would you base it off of? Would you base it on your, profit, your revenue?
I would be trying to get to a market salary as soon as possible. So think about the work that you're actually doing. And, a lot of us want to say, okay, I'm a CEO of a 2-person company and I should be making $2 billion a year, whatever. But like, if you look at the actual work that you're doing, if you're like, okay, I'm in real estate, imagine if I worked at a real estate brokerage and if I was doing the transaction work I'm doing. Like, am I a transaction coordinator? Am I an acquisition specialist? Like, what is the work that I'm doing? And what does Indeed say that work goes for? you know, like, you come up with what is a market salary for the position that you're doing mostly in the business, and you want to try to get yourself to there as soon as possible. And so if Indeed says you should be making 60,000 or 80,000 or 100,000 or whatever, then you need to, as a business, start to generate 80 or 100 or 150 or 200 in order to justify paying yourself that market salary. And then you need to start layering in the other costs of the people that support you. Now, the way you increase your earning potential beyond that market salary is you take on a job in your business that has a higher market salary, or you start developing profit in your business that you can pay yourself in addition to the salary, profit distributions. And so when you're thinking about starting or going off on your own, have that number in your head that's like, how soon can I get back to this number or greater? That is your first milestone. And then set your next job and your next job, and give yourself raises, I guess, every year.
What about on employing people? A lot of people right now, especially as they start off, there's like, hey, I just need one VA, two VAs, maybe, a couple people doing outbound, sales calls, etc. When would you say is a good time? Obviously, probably depends on the industry and type of business. Consulting would be different than a software company.
Yeah.
But in theory, in general, when you should hire and actually have someone be a full-time employee rather than just a VA.
If I had 3 months of someone's salary in the bank, that was my trigger to hire somebody. So like I would look at, okay, if they're going to be, 40,000 a year or 50,000 a year, whatever it is, I would say, okay, I need to have $15,000 or something in surplus that's coming in order for me to feel comfortable with bringing this person on, because every business has little ups and downs, and you don't want to bring someone on this month and have to fire them the next month because you can't afford them. And so you want to make sure you've got a little bit of that surplus that you can ride the wave of the momentum and the deals that are coming into your business. And so just know that might be different for other companies, but set that threshold, figure out like how much do I need to save up in the business to feel comfortable bringing on this new expense to my business for the next couple of months.
Makes perfect sense. And then what about, like I mentioned to you in the very beginning, we have kind of two different audiences. We have people that are scaling, and then we have people just starting off. So the people that are scaling past that seven-figure range, going to eight, what do you see as the main constraints that you kind of have to deal with and walk people through?
Leaders. The thing from going 7 to 8 figures is you can't lead the whole business yourself. You need to have a management team that is stronger in every aspect of the business than you are yourself. So as a CEO, a founder, we're supposed to be good generalists and visionaries, and we're going to infuse energy into different departments. Like when I look at what I do today in Trainual, I spend sometimes a season of my energy will go deep into our product, where I'm talking to customers, I'm hanging out with our product managers, I'm sketching with our designers on the whiteboards, and that's where all my energy's going. And then maybe a different season, I'm going all in on partnerships and developing new channels, and that's where all my energy goes. But I have leaders across every department that if I'm not looking at their department, they're doing a way better job running it day to day than I could. I think hiring the right people fast is the best thing you can do to scale. You need to figure out the areas of your business that you shouldn't be running anymore and put leaders in place, not just managers, but leaders in place that can oversee that and have a vision for how to make it better.
One of the most requested questions or solutions that people were looking for in the masterminds that we put on, which are for 7 to 9 figure entrepreneurs, was how to find top A-level talent. So I know you got a little something from me, Chris. So give me some golden nuggets on how to find and attract A-level talent for your company.
Well, find and attract are the two different areas. And so first I'll start with attract. People want to work at some place that attracts them, some place that's cool, and so your employer brand, the culture that you developed, the referrals, the testimonials, the videos that are on your website, the stuff that people hear about your brand attracts people that want to work with that. And so, for our brand, we are sponsoring Ironman races where our logo is on the metal. We've got signs in Sky Harbor at the airport where we are partnered with the Phoenix Suns and Phoenix Mercury. We are, Inc. Best Places to Work 4 years in a row. And so by appearing in these awards and showing up in these publications, anybody locally that's like, oh, I want to kind of be in the software business, they're going to see us near the top of the list or at the top of the list and be like, oh, that's one of the companies that I aspire to work at. And so part of that attraction is just building a brand and a reputation. And then the other part is finding people, like the best people out there are not just looking for their next job. They're passionate about what they're already doing. And so it's up to me to be reaching out to people on Instagram and LinkedIn, following their content, engaging with them, like networking when I go to in-person events, so that I can find the next bench of talent and say, why aren't you working at Trainual? Like, you're amazing. I would love to work with you. And part of it is definitely attracting people from whatever they're doing.
That's amazing. How good did it feel when you actually were on that Inc.'s, best places to work? Because that just seems like an amazing thing to accomplish.
So good. So like with, Inc. 5000 is the fastest growth. We've been on that for the last 3 years. And the only reason it hasn't been for 6 years is they require 3 years of company history before you can even apply. And so we've been on that every year we're eligible. But I always thought like the revenue growth is a kind of a vanity story, but what's it like behind the curtains? And consulting, I interviewed so many people that just like were toxic cultures. I'm more proud of the Inc. best places to work nationally, which is a smaller list. I think it's only 400 or 500 companies, than about the Inc. 5000 growth one. So yeah, it's a special culture here.
What's one thing they can, attribute to winning that award? What kind of culture do you guys try to, fit? I guess really stand out compared to other places. I know you mentioned sponsoring, but what else is something that you guys do that's kind of different?
Well, this seems like such a low bar, but maybe anybody listening to this is like, oh yeah, I do need to work on that. So we do this thing where we ask all of our employees for feedback regularly in like an engagement survey, and then we analyze the results of the engagement survey, and then we announce all of the like things that people asked for, complained about, whatever, and then we act on it. So those are the 4 A's that kind of go into that. It's really, really simple, but the most common thing when I was consulting that I heard is that people just don't feel cared about. Their ideas are not put into action, their requests are not taken and acted upon, their expertise is not sought after, they don't feel empowered to do what they're doing. And when you've got like a disengaged workforce and team, they're not going to show up every day wanting to make the place better. And so I think the number one thing we do is that 4A process, where we're just asking for feedback, analyzing results, announcing, like sharing it, screenshots, and saying, here's what you all said, and then taking commitment to actually act on it.
I love that. I've actually not heard about the third one, third A, the announcing it and showing the screenshots.
It's
I love
so
that. That's
powerful.
great.
When somebody complains about something and it's anonymous, so they say whatever they're going to say, and sometimes it's harsh, and you put that screenshot up in an all hands meeting and you're like, look what someone said. And you're like, man, they're kind of right. And here's what we're going to do about it. Like, that honesty and transparency goes so far.
That's incredible. All right, I got some fun questions. Well, some of these are fun, some of these are serious. If you're hosting a dinner party, you have 3 guests that you can invite. Who are the 3 people?
If it was today, you, Ramon, and Elijah, because that's who we were talking about.
My man, I love that answer. All right, now 3 people that you don't know, that if you were put at a dinner party with just 3 people and yourself, and you just want to like get to know these people on a deeper level because you maybe don't know them at all yet, who would you have at that table?
I would probably go with I don't have the names right now, which this is now homework for me, but I would be picking like the chairman or chairwoman of the like top 3 trade associations that we're trying to get Trainual into, to just be like homies with them and make sure that we, you know, get tight into their conferences and their events and their masterminds. And like, that's the mindset I'm in right now. So I would pick 3 new channels.
Real strategic on that one. I like it. Speaking of big names, you've had some awesome people on your podcast. Someone that I want to connect with, you've had Sam Parr, who's awesome.
Yeah.
Damon John, David Meltzer, who Meltzer's a friend of mine, Ali Webb. Who is your favorite guest to interview and then have like a deeper relationship with?
Gosh, Allie's fun. and she's I like her stuff on Instagram too. I think Gary Vee is a great interview, and got to spend a day with him in New York City and his team, and that was learned so much about how they operate and how quickly they move. Damon is an investor, so he's been great to have on. A lot of the relationships, or the best relationships for me, have become investors in Trainual, because they see what we're doing, and when we execute year after year, then they want to get involved somehow and be a part of that growth. I think our investors are, founder of Indeed. I mentioned Indeed already. Yeah, those are some of my favorites.
That's amazing. What's your biggest failure and what did you learn from it?
Gosh, this is always the hardest question, because maybe I'm like blind to failure and I'm just too resilient. I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be resilient. And so when something doesn't work, it's almost more common than when things work. So I think going back is probably like in my video production days, there were big failures where like we missed an event, like totally forgot about it. And the event called us and said, we have no feed for the Jumbotron and the judges, and where's the live feed? And no one showed up. And it was just a mistake of it didn't get communicated, So like those are the things that haunt me that could be solved with process. The initial launch of Trainual that I thought was going to be a massive windfall, and we sold 3 accounts, like that felt like a huge failure, but obviously we bounced back from that. I don't think the second launch would have happened without the first launch failing. That's the theme, is like there's so much failure. You mentioned the getting to $1 million. Like my business took 8 years to get to $1 million, the video business. And that's when it started scaling, but like sometimes you've got to go through that. And it's just the trying every different angle and every different strategy that embeds those lessons in your DNA. And then the rest of your life, carry that with you and you succeed a lot more quickly. But it takes going through that.
Oh, 100%. Failure is just learning lessons. Do you kind
Yeah.
of abide by that?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
And then I was going to ask you how long did it take to make the first million, but you already said it. 8 years with the video business.
Yeah.
And then what about with Trainual?
Trainual was in month 12.
Month 12.
Yeah.
Under a year.
It was just over a year. It was 12 months and 2 weeks. It pissed me off, but it was
You're like, I want to do this 0 to 1 in under a year.
Yeah, yeah.
So I got to ask you, you just hosted a big event recently.
Yeah.
Talk to me
Playbook.
about that. How was that? What is it?
Incredible. So 4 years ago, I went to this category building workshop where they said, you should come up with the one word that when people say it, they think of your business. And at the time we were like, okay, we're a training manual, operations manual, business, playbook, systems, processes. And the word I really like attached to was playbook, was the idea of having a playbook for your business. It felt so natural. It felt easy. It was like approachable and accessible. And so we started saying business playbook a lot. We bought the trademark for business playbook. I called my book the business playbook. And over the last few years, we built a lot of IP around playbooks. And so in 2020, we decided we wanted to do our first big event. It was going to be called Playbook. And then when COVID hit, we pivoted to make it a virtual event. And it was the best thing that happened. We got 3,000 or 4,000 people attend a free virtual event. And so we repeated it 2021, 22, 23. And we were building this big virtual stage, bringing in awesome speakers, Shaquille O'Neal and Gary Vee, and that's Ali Webb was there, and Seth Godin and Damon John, and bringing in these awesome speakers. And last year, we thought maybe it's time that we go in person. And so we put it out to the network and said, if we did an event in person, would you come? And we got a bunch of yeses. And so we did this really intimate event last week, 300 tickets sold out. We filled up this little warehouse in downtown Phoenix. We had, again, incredible speakers, and we're on to something. Like the energy in that room, people talking about culture and about the operations behind their business and about delegation, real tactical advice, was just off the charts. And so now we're going to do this in person every year, and it'll get bigger and bigger.
That's exciting, man. What was the one takeaway that you got from it?
Sleep a lot the week before, because I'm not going to sleep much the week of.
I hear you on that. As someone who runs in-person events, it's very, very true.
Yeah.
Chris, can you you won a talent show? Is this correct?
Talent show? I performed in one. I don't know. I don't think I
Is
won it.
is a Twister rap? Is that something that
Oh yes,
is this
I
your video
can do it.
production days? What is this?
I can rap Twista. I did. All right. So if the rapping is what it's about, then yeah, when I was in seventh grade, I did a talent show that was, I was rapping Jay-Z and Jermaine Dupri, Money Ain't a Thing. And I'm throwing out Monopoly money onto the crowd. And the newspaper got like this amazing photo of me throwing money into the crowd and prints Money Ain't a Thing by Chris Ronzio. And it was on the front page of the town newspaper.
Oh man, I need to put this in the thumbnail or something because that's epic.
Yeah. So good.
Good. Shout out to Elijah for giving me some, Nardwar type information on this one.
That's funny. Yeah.
As we wrap up, man, multiple people have reached out when they said, "Man, Chris is someone you need to connect with. You need to have him on the podcast." And just let you know, you lived up to the hype. But besides that, they mentioned that you're just such a down to earth guy, and you have an amazing ability to not only be super successful in business, but have an amazing family, and also train, run marathons, stay fit, be in good health. How do you balance all this? What is something that's like a tip, or are you just super intentional? Like, give people some wisdom. I'm solo, I'm single, and I sometimes struggle with balancing and juggling everything. So Chris, what is the secret there?
I think the real secret is that the better you get in each of those areas, it fuels the other areas of your life. So like when I wake up early and I'm on my routine and I'm running, I'm on the trails or I'm lifting, I feel like I'm on top of the world. You walk into the office and knowing that I ran 10 miles this morning and you feel like, okay, I can do anything today. Like watch me, cut me loose. And then you show up with that like certainty and that power at work, and then you have a great day at work and you go home in the afternoon and I can disconnect. I can turn my email off. I can play with my kids at the park. I can go to date night with my wife and I have an incredible night and feel so fulfilled. And then I wake up the next morning and do it all over again. And so I think the misinterpretation is that to be great at one of these things, I need to go all in at the expense of everything else in my life. And what I've learned is that investing in each of those categories actually raises the tides in all areas. If you spend the time working out and being disciplined there, that discipline is going to carry over to how you run your business. And if you give yourself these constraints of, I've only got 8 working hours during the day, I better make those the best 8 hours of the day advancing my business so I don't get caught in the minutia. And then if you prioritize the relationships at home, then you feel supported when you do want to take the big swings and go after the business. So it's like everything kind of pays dividends to the other categories. I think you just have to know what you're trying to achieve in each of those areas. And so the last tip I would give is, like, as people are going into the next year, as you sit down and do your planning, divide those areas up and think about big outcomes that you want in each of those areas and pursue them in parallel. Don't just go all in on one goal. Pursue 3 or 4 parallel goals and watch them get easier as you succeed in each other one.
Man, mic drop. And as we wrap up, one last question before we want people to connect with you. Someone is in that year 1 of Trainual right now. They're in that maxing out cards. They're probably stressed out. Maybe their wife's like, "What are you doing?" What's some advice? What's something that you would give to that person?
I would say dig deep in yourself and ask yourself if you have the conviction and if this thing is really going to work, or if you are delaying the inevitable of moving on to the next thing. And I think deep down, when we're failing, there's one of those 2 answers that reveals itself. It's either I'm going all in on this and I'm not stopping, or at some point I'm going to stop and I'm just procrastinating. And I think you've got to get really clear about which direction it is, and then either get out of it as quickly as you can and course correct, or have a bigger plan for how you're going to make this thing successful. Bring in the right people to support you. Do some annual planning for next year. Like, go all in all in or all out, I guess would be my advice.
Chris, before people find you on social media, which we'll put all the links in the description, Growth House, we're a go-giving community, meaning no one's going to reach out to you and to say, "Hey, can I pick your brain?" If they do, I don't know them. They're not my people. So with that being said, we want to provide you some type of value. You just spent, an hour with us on Zoom, on Riverside, doing this podcast. What's something? It could be small, could be something big, connection, resource. What are you looking for that we can provide value to you before we even reach out?
I would say everybody's got a bunch of businesses in their life, and whether they are a fit for Trainual or not, the message I want is that every business runs better with a playbook, and people should be asking all of the businesses in their life what they use for their playbook. Where is their playbook? Have they taken the time to be intentional about how their business works, about who does what in the business, because they will create better businesses. And so even if no one ever reaches out to me and no one ever signs up for Trainual, I would love everybody that's listening to be doing that work and asking people how their business functions and encouraging them to get more formulaic about it. To reach out to me though, like I love building relationships with people, and the two places I hang out are LinkedIn and Instagram. So on LinkedIn, that's where I'm posting like my business musings and philosophies. On Instagram, that's the behind the scenes of my life, all employees, my daily schedules, my workout routines, stuff with my family. So if you want to see how I operate, that's where I am.
Man, Chris, you lived up to the hype, like I said. It's a pleasure connecting with you. Jesse Ray, Growth House Podcast, and we're out.